Mike,
Adrian, welcome to London.
thank you. It's a lot warmer here than in
Oh,
the
okay.
East Coast. I
Yeah.
left minus 30
Oh, wow.
Celsius with wind chill.
Yeah, I can't really imagine that. We just got rain for you.
So, you have been working in global governance, corporate services, entity management for 25 years,
Yep.
plus or minus,
Yep.
across EY, PwC, and now
Yep.
Elevate.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen? Tales from the road.
Tales from the road. So, yeah, I probably spent most of my career in the Big Four, whether that was PwC or EY. Did a small stint in-house. I lived in Paris for a couple of years working for a big ad media group there, which also made me realise that I wasn't an in-house kind of, that wasn't
Right.
for me.
Yeah.
So I prefer to operate in the professional services consulting side of things.
You like the late hours.
Yeah, the late hours, the timesheets, all the good things that go with that. Yeah, no, I think the dynamism and the doing
Yeah.
different things. Love working with clients. So that's been kind of a key driver. Recently joined Elevate, which is a very entrepreneurial and dynamic culture.
Yeah.
And really where I see governance, entity management going, if you think about the rise of the ALSPs or the law companies in the legal sector, right? It's no different from what it's like for governance.
Right.
You've got in a law department, you've got lots of lawyers who are, well paid and are really should be engaged on the higher value, more complex, risk, contentious matters. And then you've got the legal ops people who are now coming in and saying, look, how do we help you become more efficient? How do we take away some of these lower value, lower complex activities? And really, it's the law companies and the LSPs who've driven a lot of that. And I think that's where the governance ops is moving and should be moving, right? It's like, how do we better leverage offshore? How do we better leverage tech?
Right.
How do we be at the forefront of AI
Yeah.
and move away from high cost hourly rate, which is kind of where the law firm and the Big Four are struggling to move away from.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And is that more when you look at Big Four law firm? Is there are the governance advisory services less operational and more strategic, or like?
I think the
How would you
challenge is just the indirect overhead. And so if you
Mm.
think about the Big Four, if you look at, for example, a tax business,
Yeah.
there's a high premium, there's tax risk.
Yeah.
People want the Big Four to do all their tax work globally because there's a premium that covers the risk of tax. And if you get it wrong, there's big consequences. If you're an FD or a tax director, you're never going to lose your job if you've got the Big Four to do it, right? When you look at governance ops and compliance around kind of COSEC compliance, it's just not that high risk, right? It's not high risk. It is more operational.
Right.
Obviously, you want to manage the
So
risk.
you can build a factory around it.
So it should be, and the market isn't looking to pay that premium. So you don't have that premium. So what you end up with in the Big Four is, how do we deliver this at the margin the market will pay? And it's hard to make that metric work within a Big Four environment where there's an expectation of higher margin because you've got, big office space, you've got layers of management, all of those things. When you look at the alternative providers in the market, they're much leaner, much more cost effective, so they don't have a huge indirect overhead. So you can start going to the market at a price point which is relative to what the market thinks these services are worth.
And so when we how you're describing that on the surface, lower risk relative to tax or M&A or those types of activities,
or litigation.
It feels like there's probably an opportunity to have more application of end-to-end AI, end-to-end automation, where when we think about the higher risk activities, you can see applications of AI being very narrow in scope, important, but more narrow in scope, right?
Yep.
So I don't think we'd ever see, for example, a litigation agent, where an agent takes, from drafting of claim
Yep.
through all of the steps of litigation to judgment.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think you'll have significant involvement of humans in there,
Yep.
orchestrating agents and AI into, discovery processes, e-discovery processes or drafting or, things like that, transcriptions of, depositions and so on.
Yep.
Is there, when we think about, and I know, AI is moving so quickly, and so we've gone from sort of like asking Copilot to draft an email for you to we have SaaS apocalypse, and like every public SaaS software company lost 50% of their market cap last week because AI is going to eat the world. But when we think about COSEC, is there a tangible opportunity there? Take away all the hype. Do you think, being in this market for 25 years, is there a tangible opportunity for there to be an end-to-end COSEC agent in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, so if you think about the contentious, commercial, risk-based, complex legal application of AI, that's where you get hallucinations, and because you're asking the AI for a lot, right? And I think that's where the context is too dynamic. It's too dynamic, and it's too, and people are still very cautious around that. When you look at some of the use cases in like governance ops, if you look at the characteristics of those kind of process and those activities, they're non-contentious, non-commercial, mostly deterministic, process-led, and you are effectively looking at multi-step workflow, where you're asking AI to do, agents to do very specific tasks with some variability, but without a huge amount of autonomy.
Right.
So what when we're talking to clients now, and this is for me, this is the phase we're at. It's a phase where we're moving away from AI productivity and into transformational AI. And the way I distinguish that is, if you look at most corporates now, to your point, they've all bought licenses for Copilot. They've deployed it in the enterprise and said, right, you lot go make yourselves more productive. They haven't necessarily given people additional time and said, okay, well, you're going to spend 20% of your time on AI.
And it's been hard to measure it.
How do you measure it? How do you measure the impact?
Right.
And some people will be really, some people will go, well, I'm 25% more productive. Some people are still using it to draft emails. Right. And so how do you measure it? And then how do you distribute that impact effectively? So the conversations we're having is more around transformational AI, which is, to your point, do we need a human in this process? Not how do we make our people more productive, but what are the processes in the function where we can do this end to end without, we don't need a human.
Right.
Or we need some kind of approval or review or judgment here in the process, but the rest of it we can use agents for.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the shift will be. And I think governance ops is almost like should be a pilot, right? So if you've got a busy legal function and governance sits within that, it should be the pilot, because there's so much low-hanging fruit.
Like the first activity.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking about drafting, routine board resolutions, scheduling committee meetings, responding to KYC requests, like those types of activities.
All of those types of things. So we've developed some kind of proof of concept agents, and a lot of what we've done is like, what are the use cases? And it's things like reminder and approval agents. So if I'm chasing people or I need to get approval for things, that's just people sending out emails, right? So you can preload
correspondence loops.
Correspondence loops. Preparing document assembly. We're not talking about contract lifecycle management or complex documents. We're talking about template production and assembly using data and some logic and rules. It's things like collecting or distributing documents. So I need to get these documents from these people on a monthly basis, or we need to distribute, or we need to take some of these documents, consolidate them and send them over here. Same with data, data aggregation, data reporting, data extraction. So when you start breaking it down, and then you can turn that into a multi-step workflow where
Right.
you chase people,
Right.
they give you something, data or documents, you take that data, you do it, you send it to someone else.
Right.
And I think that's where it's low risk deployment.
Yeah.
Nobody enjoys doing that work, right? So
Yeah.
you're not taking away someone's job that they love. It's like, okay, if I don't have to send reminders every month to these 20 people,
Yeah.
I'm not going to miss that.
Yeah.
There's not a huge amount of change management, which is another one of the big challenges. So for me, it's like that's the fertile ground
Yeah.
where you can start doing some really nice transformational projects without risk and without huge disruption.
What Mike and I are looking at here is the new Moore's Law. And so this is the length of coding tasks that AI models are able to do. So on the left, we have time. So we're going from 0 hours to the top tick there is 6.7 hours. And on the right is when the models are released. And so we're in sort of this parabolic phase if you look at the top dots there. So those are the latest Anthropic and OpenAI models. If you look at the sort of the staircase there, essentially what's happening is the length that these AI agents can operate without requiring human intervention is doubling every 7 months. And so when they run into problems or they're hallucinating or something like that, they can catch themselves running into those problems. They can catch themselves hallucinating, building things like agents that will debate each other. Mm-hmm. About how to solve a problem autonomously, right? And you can go and you can look at the conversations they're having with each other autonomously, and so we're at a point now where now this is software coding, right? Which has been one of the biggest applications of AI, and the sort of the inference, the assumption here is that software coding is sufficiently analogous to business tasks. But what this curve is telling us, if it keeps going. By the end of this year, agents will be able to operate autonomously for 30 days. Mm-hmm. And by the end of 28, they'll be able to operate autonomously for a year.
Yep.
Right? And I mean, when we think about the potential of that, right? If we're right now building out, essentially a bank of micro agents that are doing all of these tasks, trying to get things scheduled, approvals, all of that. Those are all going to be sub agents to potentially an orchestration agent that can be running for long periods of time. And we're starting to look. I mean, this is called long horizon agents. I mean, if we believe that governance and COSEC is an area where you can have that there's a sufficient amount of sort of low risk, linear activity, right? I think this is the next frontier in AI, right? As you said, and then organizations can really start measuring because, they can start eliminating invoices, right, from third parties, right? So you have, 6-7 figure invoices to manage subsidiaries, around the world. Can this, are we going to a world where this can all be internalized inside an organization?
So I think that the capability and the potential is huge.
Right.
I think there's what still needs to happen.
Yeah.
Is all of the AI readiness, right? How do we get ready for this? So we have all of this capability. And I think where AI is going, there's not going to be a huge amount that AI won't be able to do.
Right.
Right. And that's not to kind of scaremonger. That's just the dynamic change in the role of the governance professional.
But the application of it to reality, taking potential to reality, is not a walk in the park.
It's not a walk in the park.
Right.
And it's not going to be generic because it's, there's a huge amount of common activities that governance functions will deliver, but then there's also specificity around industry or where you're operating and things like that. So it's not going to be a one size fits all.
Like financial services versus healthcare.
Absolutely.
Completely different.
Yeah. They'll have a lot of common stuff, but then they'll have all the additional reg layer and things like that. Yeah. So, and then the other part of this is, the reality is, if you're working in an enterprise that's investing in AI, they're not focused on governance, right? They're focused on the front office, like how do we make more money, sales, marketing, all of those things, or product development.
Yeah.
or they're focused on the big ticket back office stuff that's going to really
Yeah.
impact the bottom line,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
finance and
HR and stuff like that.
So
Yeah.
and IT, right? That's a big one.
Yeah.
So the challenge for the governance kind of COSEC function will be, how do we get attention internally so we can drive this? How do we get AI ready so we're putting the guardrails and we're driving that roadmap? Because if they don't, this will happen, right? So if you think about what's happening at enterprise level, we've spent X on AI licenses, whether it's Copilot or Alno, whatever it is, and now there's pressure from the board to say, well, through the pilot phase now, what are some tangible outcomes? And we want to see,
and then that's going to go, and then that pressure, how that cascades, will go to the CEO. The CEO is going to go to management and is going to ask every function.
Yeah.
Show me your numbers. What are you doing? because this has to get reported up.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to be the company that hasn't been able to tell the markets that we've improved our margins with AI.
And the markets are interested, right? So it's part of your, how do you engage with your shareholders or stockholders? It's like, this is on the agenda now.
Yeah.
What are you doing with AI?
And it has to translate to
How we
margins.
measure it.
It has to translate to margins. Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. It's exciting if you embrace it, or it's daunting if you bury your head in the sand and go, this isn't happening. It's happening.
Yeah.
And like I say, there's, governance is obviously a key area as well, because it's governance, right? So what are the guardrails?
Yeah.
A lot of the COSEC and governance people I talk to, they've got two lenses when they look at this. It's like, one, my responsibility and my mandate to service the board. How are the board getting access to the right information? How are the board understanding AI and its impact? How are we training the board around AI so that they're like properly prepared? But then also from a my own function, how am I applying AI and how am I demonstrating that we're actually thinking about this and we're not just running pilots and things like that.
Anthropic releases Claude, legal skill, add-on plug-in type of thing.
Yep.
Reaction to market is, this is the first time a model has released, like one of the model companies has released a specific legal capability. And I think that was, everybody was sort of waiting for when they would do that.
Yep.
Market reaction to this was immediately Thomson Reuters, Lexus, Wolters Kluwer's, any stock that has significant exposure to, legal markets, LegalZoom, all down, 20, 30%.
Yep.
Immediately that then spreads, that market reaction spreads to the rest of the software market. And we have last week what's called SaaS apocalypse, where the idea is that all software is irrelevant because everybody's just going to be able to, these AI model companies are going to just consume the entire world. Yeah. Right. And, sort of Terminator moment. It was interesting. So this company, the Contract Network, I believe it's some type of legal AI CLM type of company. They ran a test and they compared a couple different agreement types using their platform versus Claude's AI skill. And they found, on the left, 50 plus text changes, new provisions, edits, issues, and so on. Claude on the same document found 6.
Yeah.
Right. And their argument is domain still matters.
Yep.
Right. Design still matters. Workflow still matters. Years and years of engaging with customer markets still matters. Right. And so there's this sort of comment around, AI, and I think this is what you're saying, AI is this incredible capability, but how do you then translate that into customer environments? And I think importantly, how do you translate that, or how do you ground it in the reality of enterprise, large company, operations? And I think the level of sort of hype and market reaction, here we go, this is an insane slide. So, one of the reasons stock prices collapsed last week is because so many earnings came out and all of the hyperscalers significantly raised guidance on how much money they're going to spend next year on AI
data.
capex, right?
Yeah.
On data centers and so on. And I mean, we're now in 2020, we're approaching $1 trillion
Yeah.
of capex, right? I mean, we're 2025 437, 26 forecast 716, 27 forecast 885 billion US billions on data centers. And so when we think about like these narratives, and when I log onto LinkedIn or go onto Twitter, you're just sort of overloaded with like everything is over. AI is going to consume everything. Everybody's irrelevant, right? All these SaaS companies are relevant. I'm going to lose my job. It's all over.
Yeah.
And I think like there's, so you see that sort of very dramatic headlines, and then the contrast I see when we work with our customers and when you work with your customers, it's a much more practical on the ground, right, application. And I think this chart explains the difference. And the reality is, to get the markets, I mean, this is all being funded, either with, debt or pulling back EBITDA for these companies. But to get the market to fund, approaching $1 trillion a year in run rate AI capex, I mean, the only way you can sell that is like the narrative has to match the number. Yeah. And it's getting so big now. That unless the narrative is AI will consume everything and transform everything, and it has to go after the biggest, pools of capital in the market, which is payroll budgets, entire, software sector.
Yeah. Well, look at legal. It's $1 trillion market, right? So you can't ignore it.
You can't ignore it. No.
You can't ignore it.
Yeah, no, you have to come for it. But I think this is like putting it, in the context of just the amount of capital that's being pushed in this. The narratives have to match the numbers.
And it's hard to gauge, right? If it feels to me, again, from like you say, from a practical perspective, where the hype is and where most of our clients are. There's just a chasm there. It's just a huge,
it's a massive chasm. Yeah, it's a massive chasm.
And so I expect some more tech-focused enterprises where they do, they've got massive dev teams and things like that. They're probably seeing a huge amount of upside because it's an obvious place to insert AI. But I think for us, when I bring that down to like governance, it's like most customers we're talking to are still working through what the relevant use case is for us. What can we apply? And we're talking to some clients in the US. US tends to be a bit more progressive, as you'd expect, around like the adoption of AI and enthusiasm for it, and also what the expectation is, like what do we think it can do. But they're typically coming to us and going, look, we think this is low value stuff. We think this should be ripe for AI, but we don't really know what how do we take this away from our team? How do we get AI to run it? And there's a lot of boring work around that, right? You've got to start, well, what are your process? How are you doing this? Can we look at... So for me, there's AI hype up here, and then there's the dull kind of stuff that you have to do, which I call AI readiness, which is what are the foundational things we need to do to get ready, to embrace. We've got this huge, like, powerful potential here, but how do we start getting ourselves ready so we can leverage it?
So in the context of SaaS apocalypse last week, where Salesforce is down, 35%. All that matters is now AI models according to markets. In governance, you have sort of a couple big pieces of software, right? That exists in governance. You have board management software. You have entity management software. Some other pieces of software. What, like, when you think about when you're working with your customers to translate AI into their environments, how do these sort of ledger-based systems of record matter in those conversations, and how you're thinking about designing that future?
So I think the way I see AI is supplemental to. I don't see it as like, let's rip out your tech and replace it with AI, because like you said, you need a record, you need a data, and you need a data structure, right? So for me, it's all going to be about API connectors. It's going to be like, and not just pull, but push, right?
Yeah, to be able to write in.
To be able to write in. How do we take the data out, utilize that data for a million different purposes, right? Whether that's specific to us in the function or to other stakeholders in finance or tax, rather than have them come to us and ask us for our data. How do we push that data to them? They can manipulate the data potentially and then push it back. That's going to really, that's going to free up the potential then of AI, because you might have an end-to-end process. Invariably, you'll want some data in that process, whether it's corporate data, it's data about your individuals. If a blocker in the process is, well, we can't get them APIs out of our system, so now we have to pull a report out the front end. I mean, you can get agents to go in and pull data out the front end, but it's not. It's like that's when you start introducing risk for the agents, right? That's when you start going, actually, that's where errors arise.
That's also really expensive.
Yeah.
So we've been looking at computer use agents to execute filings.
Right.
And it can get incredibly expensive because how they are operating is they're taking a screenshot of each sort of iteration of the UI, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're taking a screenshot, sending it back to the model to get processed with machine vision, and then instructions are sent back about what to do next.
Yeah.
Right. So every one of those interactions is costing, $5, $6, $7, $10, right?
Yeah.
Because you underestimate the number of screenshots you're having to take to get through anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're starting to run. There is, there is a world here where, and this sounds very counterintuitive, but unless the energy, the ability to produce more energy, and this has to get paid back at some point.
Well, they're putting data centers in space now, aren't they? I mean, that's the next frontier, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't sound cheap.
No,
so you do wonder, is there going to be a point where it has to get rationalized that some activities it's actually cheaper for humans to do than for AI to do?
Yeah. No, I think the other part of this is, let's not also forget just automation, like non-AI automation as well. You know what I mean?
Totally. So the way you can rationalize costs on building filing agents is you are actually still using RPA, robotic process automation.
Yeah.
So old school screen scraping, fill in the fields.
Who'd have thought RPA would be old school, eh?
Right.
Yeah.
Old school RPA to do it, and what you use the AI for is called self-healing. Mm-hmm. So the AI is actually building out the RPA. A human isn't.
Okay.
And then if there's any changes to the interface,
process,
the AI recognizes it and updates the RPA. So the
AI runs the robots basically.
Bingo.
Yeah.
But I think that's where you start this sort of these narratives start to sort of fall down with everything we've built since the year 2000 or so in terms of software.
Well, that was always a challenge with RPA, right? It's like the process changes slightly or something changes slightly and it breaks.
Yeah.
But if you've now got like an AI shepherd who's making
sure,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I think that just that alone tells you like the potential for delivering governance tasks. And like you said, one of your earlier comments was like, do we think that global entity management could become an internal, you're probably always going to need someone locally to make sure things are being done, and we'll only be able to move at the speed of local authorities who have digital filings and things like that, you know what I mean? But a lot of the production will be centralized, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to rely on lawyers in every country to produce some template minutes.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not going to happen. It's not sustainable.
No.
And even, one of the challenges we had when we tried to tackle this was like, oh, well, if you use, old document automation software, it would always break when you're trying to get dual language resolutions, or even if it's in Belgium, it's 3 languages. Do you know what I mean? Formatting and things like that, you don't have that problem anymore with AI. Do you know what I mean? So all that contextual stuff, it changes. So again, that potential is there.
Yeah.
As soon as the market starts trending in that direction, and it's about building the trust, then that's obviously where it's going to go.
Yeah. So we're starting to work together between Athenian and Elevate on some projects. So we have some mutual customers. What's the vision you have of how you can bring Athenian into your tech stack, into your technology and operational vision for your customers?
Yeah. So we're looking at an AI first platform, and we have a lot of it built, and we're building a lot the kind of rest of it at the moment. An entity management system is a critical part of that, right? Because that is the core data set. That's kind of the precious DNA of the organization, and we see that as like multi-use. But some of the things that we're looking at driving is like more self-service, right? So again, when you look at a huge amount of activities that come into the governance function, so intake, a lot of it is relatively low complex, low value, and the only reason they're coming to you is because you're like the guardian of the data, right? So if you can introduce self-service, whether that's through chat or some other interaction intake tool, you can reduce the amount of time your function is spending just servicing low value requests, whether it's for data, whether it's for documents, whether it's like basic document assembly. So we've done one pilot around like secretary certificates, which is like, we need to certify this core corporate data. Some of that data is in our EMS, some of it's in our signatory lists, some of it's just our registers. But do we need a human to do that? Actually, for 80% of the low complex ones, we could just get an agent to do that. We have visibility. That just takes a big admin task away from the team. So what we're building within that, and then, like I say, all of the other agents around chasing reminders, data. So you start building this integrated tech stack, which includes intake, self-service, compliance management, document production, and freeing up that. What I really like about Athenian, the testing we're doing is we can pull the data out, but we can also push it back in.
Yeah.
And so you could envisage a scenario where people pull the data out, utilize the data, maybe change the data and push it back in.
Yeah, and then write it back in.
And you don't need
APIs.
Yeah, and you don't need a team of people going in. And when you look at, if you talk to big corporates now who've got hundreds or thousands of entities, they'll have that's like 2 or 3 people's most of what they do, servicing data requests, manually pulling off org charts or reports or data out of the system and updating the system. Right. And those roles are like hard to retain because nobody, people do it for a year and they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. They're challenging and it's low value. So straight away, you build the right parameters and the rules, you're already relieving people. And I'm not saying, you redeploy those people to do something more interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think the part of AI for me as well, and I'm slightly going off piste here, is if we can get AI to replace a lot of those low value, low complex activities in the function, it's not about, we reduce our headcount and cost. It means we can focus on the higher value activities, right? And governance functions need to be really clear. Where do we add value? Who are our key stakeholders and where do we add value? And that should then be the focus. And for me, AI should be either enhancing that area or it should be reducing the time we spend on the other activities so we can spend more time in that area as well. And that's what I think the bit with AI that may be missing is that strategic deployment of where do we add value? Does AI enhance that? Yes, let's focus on that. If it doesn't enhance that, let's stop spending time on this low value stuff, right?
Right. That makes sense. Let's shift to, from AI and operations, let's shift to geopolitics, right? So you're helping large enterprise manage complicated global structures touching a lot of different countries. We're now in a very noisy global environment where we have tariffs, trade warfare, it's called now. We have, maybe NATO's breaking down and, we have a lot of countries are diversifying away from, or trying to diversify away from the United States.
Yep.
Carney's speech at Davos.
Mm-hmm.
European pension funds, institutional investors dropping U.S. bonds, gold up, silver up, with central banks buying and dumping U.S. bonds. How, I mean, I imagine that this is a topic that large multinational enterprises are thinking about, and how they maintain a global presence and have resilience and, durability and agility in that.
Yeah.
What are those conversations like?
Well, to be fair, a lot of those conversations obviously are happening in the C-suite, and so people who are sat in the boardroom in a governance hat are having exposure to those. Like, what are the real world kind of impact of those decisions? And like you say, a lot of it is around like supply chain, tariff and tax management, and how that the implications for the enterprise, and new markets, like what are the new markets we should be looking at. How that then feeds down into the actual structure. A lot of it's like supply chain, right? I think there's a lot that's still happening, which is at the advisory and planning stage. But that's going to be felt probably in like 12 to 18 months around like restructuring, right? So from a global perspective, it's like, what do we need to do with our structure? Because if you start changing your trade in terms of like your supply chain, that will then have tax implications. You're going to need to restructure your group to optimize. So if you think about your global structure, it's all set up to optimize your tax, right? Which is based around your supply chain and tax treaties and trade agreements. If all of that structure is changing because of your supply chain, you will then need to manage all of the tax implications of that new structure, right?
Right.
Which is going to result in huge amounts of reorganizational work, insertion, tax vehicles, things like that. So it will probably result in a proliferation of new entities and reorgs and things like that. So, and again, what does that mean? It means if you're running your global structure in a reactive way, and getting things done takes a long time because you don't have the right controls or the right kind of proactive model, the business is gonna lag, because the execution, if you think about it from a governance perspective, a lot of what we do is execution, right? We're not involved in the decision making so far as it's led by the commercials or the tax or whatever. That's where the decision is made or why it's made. But then it comes down and go, okay, we now need to execute. We need 10 new companies. We need to insert these. We need to transfer these. That's where you need to be proactive.
So should governance teams be expecting there are conversations in the boardroom about how do we need to transform our structure, our global presence in this new reality?
Yeah.
And in 12 to 18 months, there are going to be changes coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
And they need to be preparing for that now and getting the right processes, the right models to be responsive to that level of sort of activity that's coming towards them.
Yeah, I think so. There'll be some industry specificity again. Obviously, some industries are impacted more than others. So consumers and things like that, and industrial products, and they're the big impact. If you're in the boardroom and you're exposed to the board because you're supporting the board, invariably you'll be party to these discussions, right? I don't think the board are necessarily thinking like structure. They're thinking commercially, like what do we need to do commercially? And based on whatever they do commercially, the tax guys are then going to come in and go, okay, by the way, we're changing this. That means there's a big tax impact and we need to think about what the tax implications are. And then as soon as the tax start thinking about things, downstream is then the governance co-sec guys go, okay, tax have come up with this great plan, and now it's landed on our desk and we need to execute it and implement it. So I think the tail will be there around the execution. And so really, if I'm looking after a global structure, I'm thinking, okay, how agile and efficient are we at executing on these things? Because, you know, every big corporate you talk to are running some kind of rationalization program. If you're not making any headway in the rationalization program, probably means you don't have the most efficient process, the best control. This is going to be like that on steroids, right? So it's like we need to change the way that our organization operates.
Right. So 2 big themes for governance teams to be thinking about that are going to inevitably drive a significant amount of change for them: AI,
Yeah.
and and geopolitics.
Yeah.
It's going to have a significant influence, and both of those are going to have. They're coming. They're going to come. Maybe not today, but they're coming, and it's going to be a long-term structural impact.
Yeah, agree. And the new frontier, I mean, you know, the AI frontier, for me, it's embrace it. And it doesn't mean, for me, embracing AI isn't like go and learn how to be a prompt engineer. It's think about the practical use cases where you could apply AI.
Yeah.
Right? That's the big piece that's missing is like, don't think, oh yeah, like you say, the tech's over here and it's like, what am I doing in my day-to-day or what my team doing that doesn't require a huge amount of judgment and how do we do it? And then the global I mean, you know, who knows where that's going to go, right? So that's
the whole point.
Yeah.
Strategic ambiguity.
Strategic ambiguity. I think, right?
That's what it's called. Well, Mike, this has been a great conversation.
Yep. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks for coming on to In Conversation.
Pleasure.